Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Brittany Cleveland. I am the Senior Manager of Partner Engagement for College Greenlight, and I will be your host for today's presentation. We give many thanks to our wonderful counselor community joining us today. We appreciate all of your contributed efforts to supporting our platform and incorporating our tools in your college conversations with your students. We have a thrilling presentation ahead of us today, led by the dynamic Gates Scholarship team. They will be detailing the requirements and next steps to complete the application. The webinar will conclude with an extensive Q&A session. It should take no longer than 45 minutes. Please note, if you all have any questions, feel free to type those questions in the chat box via the GoToWebinar platform. In addition to that, if you all are not able to make it throughout the entirety of today's presentation, we will be recording and sending over the slides to all those who registered after today's live presentation. But before we dive in, I'd like to address those who are new to College Greenlight. I want to give you guys a big welcome. We are very glad to have you all here, and we are looking forward to learning a little bit more about who's in the room and interested in joining and excited about you all joining our community. But first, I would love to tell you guys just a little bit more about College Greenlight and who we are. College Greenlight, we are a free college and scholarship resource for underrepresented and low-income students. We build a suite of free tools, resources, and relationships with counselors to combat undermatching and help our students find best fit colleges and scholarships to help them fund their education. While on College Greenlight, students can research colleges by academic, social, and financial fit, connect with college admissions reps, receive invitations for special admissions opportunities, including fee waivers, fly-in programs. Additionally, students can be matched to awesome opportunities like the Gates Scholarship and more national and local scholarships focused on their financial needs, academic background, extracurricular activities, and easily organize their scholarship list by competitiveness and effort to complete the application. Additionally, counselors, you can use College Greenlight to generate reports of students' college and application progress. If you all are interested in learning more about College Greenlight and excited to join our community, please contact us at info@collegegreenlight.com. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to the Gates Scholarship team, Dr. Christina Tingalakis and Daniel Endeza. Christina is the Director of Financial Aid for Hispanic Scholarship Foundation, Fund. She is responsible for leading and managing all aspects of financial aid to ensure that all student financial aid packages for scholarship programs are delivered in compliance with federal, state, and institutional regulations and policies. She is also responsible for the development of financial aid content for students and delivers key components of the scholarship programs. Prior to joining HSF, she worked at University of Southern California as an Associate Director of Financial Aid. Christina received her undergraduate degree from University of Southern California and her master's degree from Western Washington University and Central Washington University. She received her doctorate in educational leadership from California Lutheran University. Daniel is the VP of Recruitment, Selection, and Scholar Advocacy at Hispanic Scholarship Fund. He is responsible for providing strategic and innovative leadership as well as guidance, oversight, and execution of scholar recruitment, selection, and support services, in alignment with the Hispanic Scholarship Fund's overall growth and development strategies and efforts. Daniel is a former Gates Millennium Scholar and a Fulbright Scholar. He holds a BA in History from Yale University and a Master's in Education in International Education Policy from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Well, please welcome Christina and Daniel.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to go over the Gates Scholarship Introduction webinar and introduce you to the application and the scholarship itself. We want to go explain to you some of the basic eligibility requirements, what the ideal candidate would look like, what the Gates Scholarship covers in terms of funding and financial contribution. And then we want to take a few moments to explore the Gates Scholarship website because it's an online application. We want to show you the application page. We want to show you how to refer a student, which is important, contribution that you can make, and also how students can enter specifically one of the more challenging parts of the application, how they can enter their online transcript, so you can assist students if they have concerns. We'll go over some important dates and deadlines and then take some time for your questions.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and start with just what the Gates Scholarship is. And so I'll begin with a basic introduction, and I'll read the slide verbatim. The Gates Scholarship is a highly selective full scholarship for exceptional, Pell-eligible minority high school seniors. Starting in 2018, the scholarship will be awarded to 300 top student leaders each year. The program will run for 10 years, so there will be 3,000 scholars total. Eligible students must be members of one or more of the following ethnic groups. So African American, American Indian Alaska Native, Asian and Pacific Islander American, and Hispanic American. Because this is the first year that we're running this program, I actually want to take just a couple minutes to talk about a different scholarship program that I imagine many of you who are listening in have heard of, the Gates Millennium Scholarship. So this is actually a distinct program from the Gates Millennium Scholarship. It is not version 2, it is not just a different iteration, it is actually a completely new grant. The former scholarship, the Gates Millennium Scholarship, commonly referred to as GMS, that was actually founded in 1999 with the main administrator being UNCF, which is the United Negro College Fund. And together with 3 other partner organizations, the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, or as we oftentimes call ourselves, HSF being one of them, they collectively administered that grant. That grant would select 1,000 students a year and would actually fund undergraduate as well as some graduate programs. This being a distinct scholarship program, being a distinct grant in itself, we are actually the sole administrators, and so the Hispanic Scholarship Fund is the only administrator for this particular grant. We will be doing all the recruitment, all selection, and all of the scholar support across all 4 subgroups, the ethnic minority groups that I mentioned earlier. This program will only fund a bachelor's degree. So unlike the Gates Millennium Scholarship, which did fund certain fields at the graduate level up to a PhD, this one will actually, or this particular scholarship program will only fund the bachelor's degree. There are no restrictions in major. There are some restrictions in terms of universities. You have to attend a university that is U.S. accredited, not-for-profit, public or private. But outside of that, it is a pretty open grant. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this grant is only for 300 students a year, as opposed to 1,000 students a year. In terms of who we're looking for, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the main eligibility, the main target population is very similar to what the Gates Millennium Scholarship is looking for as well. But I did want to sort of just take a minute to just talk about the previous program, talk about this new program, and just establish the fact that this is in fact a distinct and new scholarship opportunity.
So next we want to stop for a minute and go over the eligibility requirements. Applicants for the Gates Scholarship must be high school graduates in the 17-18 academic year and planning on attending a U.S. accredited not-for-profit, private or public 4-year degree granting institution. Applicants must be from one of the 4 target minority communities: African American, Asian or Pacific Islander American, Hispanic, or American Indian or Alaska Native. Applicants must be an American citizen, a U.S. national, or a permanent resident with an alien registration number. They must be Pell eligible in the 18-19 age year, and they will be directed to the federal FAFSA forecaster to estimate that eligibility, because we are asking for this information before the FAFSA is available on October 1. So we are relying on the federal tool to estimate Pell eligibility for the phase 1 of the application. Eligibility in all the areas will be verified at the semifinalist stage before passing on to phase 2 of the application process.
So that is who's eligible. Now let's talk about what kind of student would be an ideal candidate. And so we set out 3 bullet points. These 3 bullet points are, of course, not all-encompassing, but I think they do give, even though they're pretty broad in nature, they do give counselors, students, parents a sense of the kind of sort of ideal candidate that we would look to have in our pool. So the first bullet point, an outstanding academic record in high school. So we give some guidance there. We say in top 10% of his or her graduating class. But to be fair, we understand that depending on the school size, depending on the school that a student attends, this number is doesn't necessarily capture all the top students in a particular school. There are some charter schools that have 100, 120 students per class. So the kid or the student who is number 13 may be outside of the top 10%, but still potentially competitive. But generally speaking, though, what is true is that we are looking for students who are maximizing the curriculum at their respective institution and who are doing exceptionally well within that curriculum. And so that could really be many different types of curricula, right? It could be all honors, it could be a mix of honors and AP, it could be being part of the IB program, it could be dual enrollment. A lot of schools now offer A levels as well. And so really whatever your school offers, whatever the student has as academic options to him or her, we're just looking to make sure that, or looking for students who are maximizing that particular curriculum. We're also looking for students who have demonstrated leadership. And so this can be shown through community service, extracurricular activities, sports, just in general, a whole host of activities that a student can participate in. For this, actually, we're taking a pretty broad approach to what leadership means. I think that there's sometimes this misconception that leadership is really just a title in a particular extracurricular club, and that an accumulation of titles makes you a leader. But that's not necessarily true, and so when we are collecting information and looking at candidates, we're really understanding this concept of leadership in a much more holistic manner. So I can give you some concrete examples to sort of nail this point home. So let's say that there's a student who is doing research. They're summer after their junior year. They're doing research at a local state university. And perhaps they're the first student from this particular high school who has partnered with a college professor to do research, to essentially be a research assistant in a lab. To us, that's a form of leadership. That is a trailblazer within the classroom. There are also a lot of students who have home responsibilities that take up a huge chunk of their time. There are a lot of students who do have to take care of younger siblings right after school because both of their parents were at work, or their parents run a small business. Common examples: they run a small restaurant, they run a small supermarket, whatnot. And so the student actually spends maybe 10 hours during the week after school working, as well as their entire weekend. For us, that's also a form of leadership that does show emotional maturity, that does show a sense of responsibility that is equivalent, if not greater than, potentially being, let's say, vice president of an Interact club at a particular high school. So we are taking all of those things into account, and all those things are being captured from the very beginning to ensure that we have an equitable process that does truly capture demonstrated leadership ability in all its forms. The last thing that we have sort of here is just a sort of guiding ideal candidate principle is we're looking for students who have exceptional personal success skills. And this is essentially our term for non-academic skills like persistence and motivation. things that we think students need in order to thrive, not only in college, but just in the 21st century. And so these can be demonstrated in many different ways. They can be demonstrated by having overcome adversity, advancing into leadership positions, dedicating time to, let's say, a difficult task, or showing or developing an interest in a hobby, etc. So these, other examples, we just put a few of those. Other examples could also include collaborative. It could be someone who's positive. Essentially skills or just attributes, or just even personality traits that are associated with success. Not only in high school, but also in college, and that potentially translate to success once these students transition into the workforce. So again, this is a pretty broad concept. It's a pretty broad bullet point, and this will be captured in many different ways in the application, from what the student records as his or her extracurricular activities and his or her accomplishments within those activities, to what the student says in his or her essays, to what teachers say in their recommendations, as well as an interview. And so we'll talk about the different phases of the application in a future slide, and so that way you can actually get a sense of where all these things potentially come into play, and how we're capturing this data to make informed decisions on our end in terms of who we select.
Okay, now it's time to talk about what the Gates Scholarship covers in terms of the financial contribution. The TGS Scholarship, or the Gates Scholarship, is a last dollar scholarship, which is designed to relieve its recipients of the financial burden of paying for college. So what it isn't, it's not a set dollar amount. It's actually a last dollar or full ride scholarship that covers all tuition and fees, including room and board, that isn't already covered by the family contribution and other gift aid. So what we'll do in terms of calculating would be take the cost of attendance, which includes tuition fees, room, board, books and transportation, and some personal expenses, subtract the estimated family contribution from that number, and all other gift aid, and then the remaining unmet need would be covered by the Gates Scholarship. Students will be required to fill out the FAFSA and comply with all requests from his or her financial aid office. They must demonstrate Pell eligibility in their first year in order to qualify for the Gates Scholarship. Students must also be full-time and maintain satisfactory academic progress at their institution. The Gates Scholarship will cover the cost of a bachelor's degree, but it will, again, it will not be a set amount. It will be based annually on the calculated need each year. After the freshman year, students may defer up to 1 year. So there is a fifth year of funding available if necessary to complete the bachelor's degree. And the term of the scholarship will not exceed 6 years. So that would be 5 years of funding plus 1 year of deferment would get us to the 6-year maximum time frame.
So now we want to talk about important dates and the different components in the application. And so I think this will be really helpful to all of you, just to understand how the application is structured. We'll give you a little bit of insight into why it was structured in this way, and it'll give you a better sense of how everything sort of fits together in terms of the data we're collecting and how we're making selection. So right now we are in the middle of recruiting students for the scholarship, as well as phase 1 of the application. So if you look at the slide, the left-hand side, you'll see Gates qualifying questionnaire. That's essentially what we're calling phase 1 of the application. That opened on the 15th of July and closes on September 15th. This is actually a very short questionnaire. It should not take students more than 2 hours to complete. It really is just very basic biographical information. We ask students to input the extracurricular activities, to input the courses, so an electronic transcript that students need to complete, as well as information on their family finances and a few other miscellaneous questions. It is, again, a very short questionnaire. Should take students no more than 2 hours, and this was actually done on purpose. We wanted to make sure that students had an incentive to apply, at least for this phase 1 of the application, even if they thought that they maybe weren't the most compelling candidate or the most competitive candidate, because at least what we find is sometimes those students are the ones we're looking for. They are the most competitive. They are the most compelling. They just don't quite realize it. So we created a pretty short questionnaire where the incentive is for all students to be able to apply. It also does open up the opportunity for a student who, let's say, finds out about this opportunity 2 days before the deadline to actually gather all the required documents, which is just to have a transcript in front of him or her, as well as his or her parents' financial information, so that they can input that. That actually does not need to be uploaded. It really is them taking the time to input it into this short questionnaire. And so again, we're estimating it should take around 2 hours. For some students, it might take maybe 3. For some students, it'll take less. But it really is a short questionnaire that needs to be submitted by September 15th. After that, we essentially are verifying and doing selection on our end. So from the 16th of September until the 14th of November, we are selecting scholars. So let's assume, this is year 1, and so we don't have concrete numbers or baseline to sort of quote from previous years. But let's assume that 10,000 students apply for the scholarship. Again, completely making up this number. It's just so that this phase can be better understood. So let's say that 10,000 students are applied for the scholarship. So we will take those 10,000 students and we will go through a selection process internally, and we will actually reach out to some of those students who are particularly competitive and ask them to submit additional documents. And so this is actually where we will request them to put us in touch with their counselors, so that the counselors can at that point upload an official transcript, as well as provide additional information on class rank, on course rigor, things of that nature. And we're also requesting that students upload other documents, such as unofficial college transcripts, unofficial copies of, let's say, AP exams, things like that. For students who are Native American or Alaska Native, this is also when we're collecting proof of tribal enrollment. And then for all students, because this is Pell eligibility is a requirement, all students will be required to complete the FAFSA in October, so that we can get that information on our end from the Department of Education to ensure that they are in fact Pell eligible. So that will all be happening mostly in October, actually, the document collection and verification of documents. And then on November 15th, after we've done our internal selection, we will be announcing the semifinalists. And so only 2,000 students will be selected as semifinalists each year. So again, using the made-up baseline number I gave earlier, so assuming 10,000 students apply, by phase 2, 8,000 of those students will no longer be in the running, and they will, only 2,000 students will be invited to phase 2. So this is an invitation-only portion of the application. In phase 2, which opens on November 15th and closes on January 15th, students will have an opportunity to complete an additional questionnaire. Students will have to complete 3 to 4 short essays, about 250 to 300 words. This is also where we will ask students to provide names of teachers so that we can collect letters of recommendation, as well as additional documents that we may need from students. So students will have 2 months to complete this. After that, we will again go back into selection mode on our end, so that we're going to have reads for all the essays, evaluation of all the teacher recommendations, evaluation of the additional questionnaires that were given to students, as well as follow-up with final documents or documents that were submitted to be verified. So that process will take about a month and a half, again, very similar to the process after phase 1. From the 2,000 students who were invited to phase 2 of the application, we will actually be selecting 600 students who will be finalists. So these finalists, they will be announced at the very end of February or the 1st of March, and they will be invited to interview. And so the interview process will take place in March. Students will have a month to connect with one of the interviewers, volunteer interviewers that we have. And they essentially, we're trying to, as best as possible, have interviews take place in person, but we understand that for some students that won't necessarily be a possibility, and so we also will have virtual interviews as well. That will take place for a month, and then we will collect all that information, go through all the interview reports, and then on April 20th, we will actually announce the 300 scholars. So as you can see, this is really a process where students need to be invited. as they progress through the different phases. What it does is it opens up the opportunity for students to who are interested to apply at the very beginning. It is a low time commitment. Doesn't necessarily require the components that students typically find very stressful when they're applying to different scholarships or colleges. And as they progress down the line, they can rest assured that if they are taking the time, the energy, the effort to complete essays, to ask for recommendations, to go through an interview process, that they are in fact competitive, that they're not just throwing their hat in the ring and seeing what happens, that they are actually a student that we're interested in, and a student that has the possibility of being one of the 300 students who will be selected as a scholar at the end. Okay. And so with that, we actually want to just very quickly, I know that we're running short on time, just walk you through sort of the Gates Scholarship website. So it's out of this and open up my browser. So the website is just www.thegatesscholarship.org. And so on the website, there are just a couple things that we want to bring to your attention. One is there's a Refer a Student tab. So if you click on the Refer a Student tab, it actually opens up a page where you, as a counselor, or anyone who essentially knows any student who you think would be eligible for the scholarship, can refer students to us. And so the minute you complete this, you can complete, I think, up to 10 at a time, or students at a time. The minute you press submit, the students will get an automated email letting them know that you, let's say it's John Smith, that you, John Smith, have referred him or her to this particular scholarship opportunity. So this is a great way for you to disseminate the information to students who you think are highly competitive, or to simply just forward this on to friends, to family, community groups that you're a part of, just to let them know that this is a possibility and they can come here to refer a student. And essentially, once they press submit, they're in our database, and we'll do the recruitment, for you. So it's an easy way for you to essentially pass that on to us, so that once they're on our radar, that we can try and make sure that they complete phase 1 of the application. We also want to just very briefly go into the scholarship application. And so we actually, if you click on the scholarship application, we have actually created a mock profile. So we can just quickly sign in. So we just want to take a quick second to show you the actual questionnaire, and so you can see. So this is an application that's essentially almost complete. A student, you can see this is the dashboard that the student would see when he or she logs in. And so as you can see, the actual application itself is pretty short. There are only 8 sections. Each section does have subsections, but they're pretty straightforward. We do want to focus on 2, but again, this should take no more than 2 hours to complete. The first section I want to stop on is a section on Pell eligibility, because students are required to be Pell eligible, and so we do have this section here where we actually request that a student check for him or herself if they are Pell eligible. So I'll pass it on to Christina so she can talk about what this part of the application process is like.
Well, we developed this method of estimating Pell eligibility because of the timing issue, because our application in phase 1 is due before the FAFSA application becomes open on October 1. So what we're doing is we're requesting students go to the FAFSA forecaster, which is a federal estimating tool, in order to estimate their Pell eligibility and then come back to the application. So what we're doing is asking them to follow this link, which diverts the student to the federal website, where you can actually estimate your, it's not just only for Pell, it's for all federal aid. We'll have the student fill out the FAFSA forecaster, answer all the questions, and hit submit. And what they'll get is a result that looks like this. So this is a screenshot of a student who is Pell eligible. So what we have here is a numerical value in the federal Pell Grant field. If a student has a numerical value in the federal Pell Grant field after accurately filling out the FAFSA forecaster, then we can safely estimate that they will be Pell eligible on the FAFSA come October 1. So this screenshot is actually in the application to help guide them through the process. And then they're asked, directed back to the application where they can answer yes, in this case, that they are eligible. If a student is not eligible, they'll get this message here that requires them to be Pell eligible. Now they may actually continue. This isn't a hard stop, but chances are that they won't be eligible, and during the selection process they would not be selected. But so that's how we're relying on the federal forecaster, and this is also a good tool for you to have if you're not already familiar with it, for guidance with your students during the normal course of business. We do refer students who are not eligible to other sources of funding on the application here. And then they're asked to go to the next section.
Okay. And so another thing I want to just quickly highlight is under the My Education, the school transcripts. So this section, we again already pre-populated this section, but this is the electronic transcript section that I was referring to earlier. For students who are just starting their application, their screen will be slightly different. This already has 2 pre-filled transcripts in it. Their screen will give them the option to choose either high school education or high school education with college courses. For high school education, that is where a student puts in courses that were taken at a high school, including AP, IB level courses. For high school education with college courses, that's where a student puts in any college course that was taken at a college, which includes dual enrollment. It includes, summer courses. From Los Angeles, so let's say at UCLA, things of that nature. I do want to highlight that there's an instructional video down here that students can click on. So if students have questions or students are confused, please refer them to the instructional video here so that they can get clarity on how to navigate the transcript. I'll go ahead and just quickly jump into this so you can quickly see what a student sees. So if we were to edit the transcript, this is the grid that student sees. So as you can see, there are 2 grids, high school education with college courses. Students are only required to input grades, courses that are completed. So we have 9th, 10th, and 11th. They can easily add as many courses as apply. They put in the subject, the course name, the type of course that it is, and then the grades that they received. They'll do this for 9th, 10th, and 11th. For courses that were taken during the summer, you should instruct your students to place it in the previous year. So if a student took a summer course, let's say this past summer, they should put it under the 11th grade tab. A lot of students also took high school level courses in middle school, and so they receive high school level credit, and it appears on their high school transcript. And so for those courses, they can actually place it in the 9th grade tab. If students need to add, let's say, multiple high schools or multiple colleges, up here you'll see that there's a drop-down for either a high school or high school college courses grid. You simply press Add, and it should appear there. I also recommend that you encourage your students to save sporadically. The system will time out due to inactivity, and so students will sometimes spend 25 minutes simply just typing in courses, not realizing that even though they're typing in the course information, if they're not pressing save or moving forward in the application, that the application will time out after an extended period of time. So also encourage your students, or I recommend that you encourage your students to, every time they put in, let's say, 3 or 4 courses, to just take some time and then just press save, and then they can continue typing. And so that should really help students make sure that this is a pretty seamless process. And so once you're done inputting all the information, you go all the way to the end. You can save and continue later, or you just press next section, which would automatically save all the information, and then that's done. At the very end, so let's assume that the student is done. These are some miscellaneous questions. The student can then press next section, and that will actually take them to a review page where they can see all the information that they have provided and the answers. You'll notice that there is an asterisk next to each question, If the asterisk is red, that means that there's a required question that hasn't been completed. And so what will happen is when the student tries to press submit at the very end, after they glance through their entire review page, it will actually bounce them back to the page where the information is incomplete. In other words, the page where required information is not found, where there's a null value. So that's something that the system will automatically do. The student then goes in and inputs the information. They come back to the review and submit page, and then once everything is done, once all the information is in place, they can press submit. They sign off on an agreement, and then that's it. Their application is submitted for consideration on our end. And so now let me jump back to the presentation. Sorry, this usually takes a second. And so what we want to do now is just very quickly just remind you of two very important deadlines. So if you remember, the phase 1 of the application actually opened on the 15th of July. And it closes on September 15th, which is about 3 weeks away. So I highly, highly encourage you to pass this information along to students. We'll be following up with additional information to help you disseminate sort of knowledge of this scholarship opportunity, and we hope that you walk away understanding that even though the application is due 3 weeks away, and even though it seems like that's not that much time, which it isn't, the questionnaire, phase 1 of the questionnaire, is actually very short. So even if a student is just finding out about this opportunity, to be fair, even if a student finds out about this opportunity 2 days before it's due, he or she still has plenty of time to complete and submit and be considered for this opportunity. And so with that, we want to actually now transition to questions and answers. I know we ran a little late, but we definitely look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Christina and Daniel. I'm going to go ahead and give you your first question, but I would like to note if you guys can speak a little bit closer to your microphone, that would be great. We've noticed a couple of audience members mentioned that there is some feedback coming from your end. All right, so the first question is what would students who identify as Arab fall in under the ethnic minorities, and would they be eligible?
That's a great question. So we actually, for the eligibility requirements, it is based on self-identification, with the exception of being Native American and Alaska Native students who need to provide proof of tribal enrollment. For the other subgroups, we actually use the definitions that are provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, and that has sort of been our guiding principle in terms of who is eligible and who is not. And so if you actually visit the U.S. Census Bureau website, you will see that Arab Americans, essentially Americans who have some sort of connection or descendants of the Middle East, are considered white by the U.S. government, and so therefore those students, unless they identify with one of the other or one of the eligible minority groups, are not eligible for this particular scholarship program.
Thank you. The next question, are DACA students allowed to apply if they have a social security number that allows them to submit a FAFSA, although they do not qualify for federal aid?
Correct. DACA students are not eligible for this opportunity. They must be a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or a permanent resident with an alien registration number.
Thank you. If a student can complete a master's degree in the 5th year, can they use that 5th year of eligibility?
Not towards master's studies. The Gates Scholarship will fund the 4-year degree, the bachelor's degree, and it will fund a 5th year towards the bachelor's degree if the student needs the extra year. But it will not fund graduate work. It will not fund a dual degree program. So what will happen if a student is in a dual degree program? The Gates Scholarship will fund only the terms in which the student is considered an undergraduate.
in the application you asked for a high school counselor's contact information. How would a counselor at a community-based organization serve as a recommender in place of the high school counselor?
That's a good question. So a student can, and I think looking at some of the submitted applications, some students have put counselors who are not their official high school counselors, who are community-based counselors, but actually students who we want to verify additional information for once we start the selection process after phase 1 of the application or the deadline closes. We are going to be very specific and request that they provide information for their high school counselor, just because we do need an official copy of their transcript that is coming from their school. I know that there are some cases where there is actually a partnership between a nonprofit or a community-based organization and a school, where they actually do have access to student records and are also allowed to pass on those official student records to organizations such as ours. Those would be the exceptions where that would be okay. But to be fair, just based on, I actually used to work in admissions, based on my experience, those are pretty rare, and pretty far in between. So most of the students should be actually including their official high school counselor who can provide that information to us.
For the 3.3 GPA requirement, does it matter if the GPA is weighted versus unweighted?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's actually the cutoff is weighted. So if the student, so I guess the answer is no. If it's a 3.3, whether it's weighted or unweighted, it has met the requirements.
And the next question is, what if the college where the students took college classes does not show up on the list?
Oh, okay. So,
and in addition to that, does a college course have to appear on their high school transcript?
Oh, okay. Okay. So for the first question, we don't have an exhaustive list of colleges and universities, and so what students need to do is when they start typing in that text box where it has the college name or the institution name, they'll actually see that the drop-down menu will stop self-populating, and then what they're typing in is the only thing that will populate. So in other words, it'll go from being a list to simply what they're typing. So what we tell students to do is to type out the complete, full legal name of that institution. So, instead of putting UCLA, they should put University of California, Los Angeles. And once they're done typing, they can actually just drag their cursor down to the name that appears in that box. They can double click and it'll self-populate. And so then they can add the additional information. And there are a lot of institutions where that is the case, and that's completely okay. And we can definitely cross-reference that on our end when we're doing selection and doing verification. Now, in terms of grades, it's okay if it's not on the high school transcript. We will still accept that. And actually, students who are competitive / compelling during this first selection cycle, we will reach out to them to submit additional documents, one of them being unofficial grades or transcripts from the college courses. We're doing unofficial for the college transcripts just because we know that they come at a cost, and sometimes that cost is pretty high. So if a student took, let's say, 3 courses at 3 different colleges, it could potentially add up to, let's say, $45, $50 for a student, which can be burdensome to some families. So for the college grades themselves and the unofficial, we're requesting unofficial transcripts. For the high school transcripts, they do need to come directly from the high school counselor, and those need to be official, and they will have to be uploaded electronically.
If the student is inputting a grade for semester 1 and semester 2, what is their final grade?
Oh, so we actually, for that transcript, we left it open in case students had a final grade. There are some schools where they'll have 3 grades and a final grade, or they'll just have the final grade. The student should feel free to leave any box that is not applicable in that little grade input section blank. So the subject is required, the name of the course is required, the type of class is required, whether it's honors, IB. But if a student is attends a school that's on a semester system and they only get 2 grades, they should really just complete S1, S2, and then they should leave S3 and final grade completely blank. So for those boxes, it really is essentially the boxes that apply. Those are the boxes a student should complete.
And an interesting question, if a student meets the citizenship criteria but has mixed educational records during high school, and that, to clarify, did the student did high school in another country and the U.S., is he or she still eligible? If so, how can you report it on the application?
So the answer is yes, that student is definitely still eligible. So for the electronic transcript, what the student needs to do is add 2 or more high school transcripts depending on the number of schools that he or she attended. So let's just assume that the number is 2, 1 in a foreign country, 1 here in the U.S. So the student would have to input 2, or have, if you remember earlier, we navigated the transcript, would have to input 2 high school transcripts. For the foreign country one, they would, again, just type in the full correct legal name of the school, and then once it appears, just double click on it. Dates attended to are pretty straightforward, but then it actually has city, state, and zip. And so our recommendation there is that for the city, that they put the name of the city where the high school is located. For the state, they can actually, it is a type in, so they can actually put the name of the country. It is not a drop down, so they can actually put the name of the country. And for the zip, they can just put 5s across the board, or 111, or 000. So an example would be, let's say a student went to the American Foundation School in Mexico City. They would type in American Foundation School, attended from, let's say, September of 2014 to June of 2015. They were there for a year. They would put in Mexico City, Mexico 55555.
And will there be 8 essays like Gates Millennium Scholars? What will the essays ask?
The essays will be about the student, so there's no prior knowledge required, no studying or preparation. So the essays will be designed to measure the student's personal success skills and other attributes that we're looking for on the application. They will be essay style. They should expect 3 to 4 questions, and with a varying length requirements, and they should be probably between 250 to 500 words at this point. But those are the parameters that we're working with.
And how do you verify a student is maximizing their school resources? Do you actually consider the schools they attend?
So several things. We actually have partnerships with the ACT and the College Board, and so they actually have and collect a lot of data in terms of course offering and things like that at different high schools. But in addition to that, once we're making the selection process after phase 1 and we're starting to request additional documents and information from certain students, part of the questionnaire that a counselor needs to complete in addition to uploading the student's official transcript is a questionnaire that does ask questions about the resources available at that student's respective high school. So questions about simple questions about class rank, number of students who attend, but also questions on, how is the student taking the most rigorous curriculum available, or just simply demanding, or average, or less demanding. And then we also ask the counselor to chime in on his or her opinion about the student and whether or not they are truly maximizing the resources at their school. Are they one of the best students that they've ever encountered? Are they just, they're very strong students? Are they average students? So we will be cross-referencing with data that we do have from our partnerships, as well as data that we're collecting directly from the counselors to ensure that students are, in fact, maximizing the opportunities at their high schools.
Well, this is an interesting question. If a student is technically a junior at the beginning of the school year, but will be graduating early in 2018, and they will be taking both junior and senior year classes, are they still eligible to apply?
They need to be a graduating member of the class of 2018, so it sounds as if in that scenario the student would be eligible.
Yeah, so as long as a student is graduating with a high school degree in the 2017-2018 academic year, then yes, the student is eligible, which in this scenario, it sounds like that is the case, and so the answer would be yes.
Okay, and for the last question, this was a question, I believe, that we addressed early in the presentation. Is there a minimum ACT score required?
Oh, good question. So no, there is no minimum SAT or ACT score required. We actually are collecting that information now because of the, and we knew this going into the application and when we were creating this, because of the demographic that this scholarship serves, we understood that a good number of students actually would probably not have taken or sat for the exam, either the SAT or the ACT, by September 15th. A lot of students will sit for the exam that, I know a few exams happened in the past few weeks, or will sit for exams in September or October. So we completely understand that. So for phase one of the application, it's really just for data collection purposes. We just want to see where a student falls and just sort of get a sense of what the pool looks like, at least with respect to that particular metric. Now, for phase two of the application, once, at that point, most students will have taken either the SAT or the ACT unless they're planning to attend a school where that's test optional. At that point, most of the students will have that data point in their application. And so it'll be one of many different factors that's considered, but it won't be a make it or break it data point. And so even if a student does exceptionally well and, let's say, scores a 1580 out of 1600, that student is not automatically getting in simply because they did exceptionally well. And vice versa, let's say a student is not the strongest test taker and scored, let's say, 1,000 on the SAT. That's completely okay as well because there are many different components that we're considering: academics, extracurricular activities, essays, recommendations, where the student is just so strong in every other dimension or on many other dimensions that that test score really won't have any kind of significant impact on the selection decision that's ultimately made. So at that point, it will be one of many different factors that's considered, but there is no breaking point, and there is no score that would eliminate a student from being in the running, being selected as one of the final 300 students.
And thank you so much, Daniel and Christina. I'm going to throw out a question that I think would be helpful. Would it be best way to contact the Gates Scholarship team for any further questions?
So we actually, on the website, there is there's like a help center, if you will, and so there's a message center within that. And so just sending us a message, and so we are checking those messages on a daily basis and trying to respond to those messages as quickly as possible. The advantage of having everything sort of centralized through that is that, especially if you have a MyTGS profile, even as a counselor, is that you yourself can keep track and keep a record of all the messages and interactions you've had with us as well. And from our end, we can also track on our end just to make sure that we are fulfilling on sort of our customer needs on our end. So that is the best approach, is to visit our website, in the Help Center, there's a message center where you just send us a note. It's very similar to sending us an email, just through this particular portal, and then we will respond as soon as we can.
And I would like to close out of today's presentation. I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us, and many thanks to the Gates Scholarship team. You guys were absolutely awesome, and provided some amazing, informative details. And again, to any of those who are interested in participating in more webinars like today, please let us know. Type "I'm interested" in the chat box, or feel free to email us at info@collegegreenlight.com. We will be sending over a recording of today's presentation with additional slides and some great resources that the Gates Scholarship team sent over to us. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you guys so much. Daniel, Christina, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Take care.
Bye.